Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by ASF and FAST. I'm Ryan Fisher, operating
Working
officer
on the
of FAST, and I am joined today by my co-moderator and collaborative partner, Amanda Moore, president of ASF. Together, we're delighted to bring you the next installment in our joint webinar series. Today, we're excited to have Ionis on the line to present on their Angelman syndrome program, which is the development of Ion 582, an antisense oligonucleotide. Just some housekeeping before we begin. We received well over 100 questions prior to today, which we've sent on to Ionis. And they're going to address a number of those questions in their presentation. And then we'll have a Q&A. If you have a question, please enter it into the chat function. While we're going to try to get to as many key questions as possible, just be assured that we're logging every question you send in. And it's important to do so because it provides everyone with clarity who's on the line with what you really want to understand and know. So regardless of whether we answer it today, we want to make sure that those questions are logged and that everyone's aware of them. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amanda Moore to get us started.
Thank you, Ryan, and welcome everyone. We're so excited for everyone to be here today. It's always a good day when we get to come together to hear about advancements and treatments in Angelman syndrome. So we're incredibly excited to have our friends at Ionis with us today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jeff Smith, who is the Vice President of Patient and Head of Patient Advocacy at Ionis, to get us started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Ryan, for your support, partnership, not just leading up to today, but for all of your collaboration over the past several years. We so grateful to have you as partners and grateful for this opportunity. I am Jeff, patient advocacy at Ionis. I'm joined by colleagues of mine from the clinical team, Val, Candace, and Rob, who will come on and share a little bit more about our program in a little bit, and they'll introduce themselves as they come on. We are grateful for this opportunity. So thank you so much. We have heard you. You have told us that you want to hear from us, and you want to hear about the progress and what's next with the program. And that's what today is all about. We want to make sure that we get you the right information at the right time. And we're always thinking about how best to do that and talking to Ryan and Amanda and others. And so this is a really tremendous opportunity for us. We appreciate it. We're grateful to have all of you here with us. Wanted to start off with just a few things here that we want to keep in mind. We're going to be talking about Ion 582, as Amanda and Ryan mentioned. It's an investigational medicine, right? We're obviously very encouraged with where we are with the program. We've got a lot of work to do to make sure that we evaluate Ion 582 and make sure that it can help. And that's what this phase 3 trial that we're going to talk about today is all about. But we did want to make sure that we provided information to you so that you can make an appropriate decision and just be aware of what's going on. While we're experts on Ionis, obviously, and our program, we're not experts on you and your situation and your family's situation. That's unique to you. And so we're not providing medical advice. We would never do that. That is for you and your family and your clinicians and clinical staff to determine. And we're happy to obviously help with understanding what we're doing and why. But in terms of decision making, obviously, want to talk to your family and your clinician on that. So with that, I want to just kick off with a little bit about Ionis for those that are less familiar with us. Ionis has been around for about 35 years. We're founded on a single principle, and that is to make scientific and medical progress for people with serious illnesses. And that single principle, is backed by a single focus, and that focus has been RNA-targeted medicines, RNA-targeted therapeutics, of which ASOs, antisense oligonucleotides, are a type. Ion 582 is an ASO, an antisense oligonucleotide. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I think many of you have heard about that from others in the Angelman syndrome community, the clinicians and scientists and others who have shared information on that. So we're not going to go into too much depth on that today. But just to say, from an Ionis, that has been our focus since the beginning. We have over the past several decades, worked hard. It's been, many ups and downs, but we're, have been able to, through the hard work, collaboration of our scientists and scientific collaborators, been able to, move ASOs from a concept, from an idea, to where they're now helping people today. And that's true for us in particular in neurology. So, that decades of experience now has been translated to our work in neurology, including now to Angelman syndrome. With what you see here is our 3 medicines that have been developed and discovered, developed, and approved now: Spinraza, Qalsody, and Wainua. And the clinical programs that we're now pursuing around those for illnesses like Angelman syndrome, like ALS, like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. And so, that decades of knowledge, the decades of experience and collaboration is now being applied to these illnesses, including our work in Angelman syndrome. And that work, started many years ago, and it has been a collaboration all throughout. And so, we're extremely grateful for the collaboration support that the community has provided and has come along with us over the years, starting way back when we're understanding Angelman syndrome and trying to understand the mechanism by which Angelman syndrome works and by which we could potentially intervene. And moving to, understanding from you and all of the, the work that you have done to, can participate in surveys, participate in the natural history study and others. That has been so helpful for us in terms of, understanding what's meaningful for you and what meaningful change looks like, so that we can design a trial to evaluate those things onto where we are today in late clinical development, where we're designing and now initiating a phase 3 trial, and obviously today's webinar is a big piece of initiating that trial. So we are grateful for the support and collaboration from all of the organizations and researchers and collaborators that have helped us along the way. We would not be where we are without you and all of you in the community and your work to share your perspective. Your work guides our work and inspires our work. So we thank you for that. And with that, I want to turn it over to Rob and the team, and we'll talk a little bit more about the program, where we are, and where we're going next.
Thanks so much, Jeff. And thanks to everybody who's joining us live and I assume watching this by video in the future. Just to introduce myself, I'm Rob Komorowski. I work in clinical development here at Ionis, and I'm going to provide you with a bit of a background on the ION 582 development program. So ION 582, which you may be familiar with already, but just to cover it again, is an investigational medicine that we at Ionis have developed to potentially treat Angelman syndrome. Now, again, many of you may already know this, but just to summarize, Angelman syndrome is, of course, caused by loss of function of the UB3A protein, and that's as a result of a deletion or a mutation of the UB3A gene that's inherited from the mother. Now, there's a copy of UB3A from the father, but that can't be produced because there's a piece of RNA called the UB3A antisense, or ATS for short, that prevents that protein from being expressed. Now, we know UB3A protein is really critical for brain cells to function properly, and in particular for those cells to be able to talk to one another. And that communication between brain cells or neurons is critical for the brain to be able to develop and learn. So our goal with ION 582 is to take advantage of that UB3A gene on the father's allele to selectively find that UB3A antisense and remove it, so the UB3A gene from the father can be unsilenced and therefore increase levels of UB3A protein in the brain. So the path to find ION582 is one that took a lot of rigorous work by the researchers here at Ionis and strong collaboration with some of the most amazing scientists, clinicians, most importantly, the families in the Angelman community. So this journey started with an idea that was first proposed by Dr. Art Baudet, that the UB3A gene on the father's allele could be unsilenced by eliminating the UB3A antisense. And so Ionis partnered with Dr. Baudet as well as other researchers and physicians who have been studying UB3A to better understand how an ASO could be developed to target that antisense. So that led to the seminal publication, which showed that an ASO could, in fact, reduce the UB3A antisense and then increase UB3A protein in this mouse study. So you can see here, published in Nature. So the team at Ionis went to work really using our 30+ years experience in making ASOs and leveraging some of the best chemists, drug developers to find an ASO that we thought would be both potent and selective for that antisense transcript while also prioritizing safety. But in parallel, we've spent years working with the community, attending many of the same conferences as all of you across the globe to meet with families, to meet with the clinicians dealing with Angelman syndrome day in and day out to really understand the symptoms, the disease, and most importantly, how that disease impacts the people and the families living with Angelman syndrome. We wanted to make sure that when we got to the clinic, we were ready to measure the right symptoms using the best measures available. So it's been a process. It's had its up and downs, but we've persevered, and so we've identified ION582, and that's being tested in the clinic currently. So here we're going to share a bit of our goal with the clinical studies, and just to kind of level set, overall our goal is to develop the most efficient and rigorous evaluation of ION582. And with that, we're hoping to eventually have a clear path to approval so that we can get ION582 to individuals living with Angelman syndrome as quickly as possible. So this process can be a long process. It's always longer than we want it to be. But in some ways that's good because we have a high bar in terms of sponsors and regulators and in terms of wanting to improve medicines that are both safe and effective. So typically that includes 3 phases of development, 3 or more clinical trials. But in rare diseases, regulators will sometimes allow us to shorten that process into 2 phases with an initial trial called the phase 1/2 trial, where you can test the drug directly in patients. The primary goal of that study is really to look at the safety of the drug across several doses, but you can also look at preliminary evidence that the drug is providing potential clinical benefit to the patients. So these studies tend to be a little bit shorter, lasting months to a couple of years. They tend to be small compared to trials of more common diseases. So here we're talking about under 100 participants. So based upon those results, and again, working with regulators, a company can elect to move to a single phase 3 trial, which there you want to really show that the drug is effective while still continuing to monitor safety. And those tend to be longer studies, larger studies, because you really want a robust data set to ultimately support approval and gain access to the drug. So we've met with regulators and decided to take advantage of this more expedited process. The HALO study, which you may all very well be familiar with, this is an ongoing study. It is that phase 1/2 study running globally. It's an open label study, so that means all the participants receiving ION582. And the primary focus here is to evaluate the safety and tolerability of the drug. So part 1 of the study, which we talked a bit about at previous meetings, was the multiple ascending doses study. So enrolled 52 participants ranging in age from 2 to 34 years old that were either a deletion or mutation positive. And in the study, ION582 was administered intrathecally into the CSF using a lumbar puncture. And this process, Candace and Valerie will go over when they talk about the phase 3, because it's going to be the same process that was used in HALOS. So as I mentioned, the study is ongoing. Participants continue to receive drug through parts 2 and 3, the long-term extension, and that is running for an additional 3 years for those participants. Also want to take the opportunity to provide you with an important update for the study. Later this year, we're going to open up enrollment to under 2-year-olds in this study to further evaluate the safety and potential efficacy of ION582. And this is really part of our overall broad goal here to ensure that we can test ION582 in the widest population of people living with Angelman. So HALO is going to keep running. It's going to run in parallel with the phase 3. And Candace and Valerie are going to take you through phase 3, the REVEAL study, in a moment, but just to touch base on it a little bit, introduce it, it's going to enroll approximately 200 new participants. So nobody from HALOS is going to be in REVEAL. This is going to be entirely new study. And they're going to range in age from 2 to 50 years old. And similarly to HALOS, will either be deletion or mutation positive. And lastly, this is going to be a placebo-controlled study. So you either get iron 5A2 or placebo administered intrathecally via that lumbar puncture. And the primary objective here is really to understand whether iron 5A2 is effective. So what have we learned from HALOS? And I know you're all here to hear about REVEAL, but I did want to take a minute and just say how important of a study HALOS has been and how grateful we are to all of the individuals who continue to participate in HALOS, whether it's the study participants, the families, the doctors, the site staff. Ultimately, this study would not be been possible without all of your efforts there. So really, thank you to everyone involved. So we've talked a bit about HALOS in the past, so I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the results, but we're really happy with how Ion 5A2 has performed in this study. We feel it has a favorable safety and tolerability profile, and also the procedure itself has been well tolerated across all 3 dose levels that we've tested. The most common events have been adverse events have been fever, vomiting, and upper respiratory infections. And these are all considered typical of individuals with Angelman syndrome. And these were not deemed as related to Ion 5A2. Additionally, and importantly, we saw evidence of improvement, clinical improvement at the 2 higher dose levels, the 40 and 80 milligram dose, across a number of important symptoms of Angelman syndrome. That includes communication, cognition, motor function, sleep, behavior. And these were assessed by the clinicians, the caregivers, people at the site. So really, from multiple points of view, it seemed like there was improvement, at least compared to natural history. So this is encouraging data. It's an open label study. We need to follow it up with a well-controlled phase 3 study and to ultimately demonstrate efficacy of the drug. So that's where we are today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Candace Jung. And Candace is the program team lead here for the Ion 5A2 program. We're really excited to have Candace come on the team. I know this might be the first time that many of you are meeting her. She has a wealth of experience in drug development, particularly in late stage drug development. So we're really taking advantage of that moving forward. And with that, I'll pass it on to Candace.
Great. Thank you, Rob. We're excited to share more about the pivotal phase 3 study known as REVEAL. And so we can just go ahead and dive right in. And before we do that, though, I first want to thank the Angelman syndrome community for your input. Your partnership and collaboration have been so important as we develop Ion 5A2. And we've had several opportunities to get your feedback and get your input. We've had a couple of caregiver advisory meetings over the past couple of years, as well as a community advisory board, where we were able to learn and understand what's important to individuals and families living with Angelman syndrome. We also had a scientific advisory board, which included parents, clinicians, and researchers. And there we were able to learn from you and inform our clinical trial design, as well as learn what we can do to make the trial more accessible for families and participants with Angelman syndrome. And we've had the opportunity to incorporate your feedback. Families will have the flexibility to complete questionnaires at home on electronic devices or over the phone so they can focus on their loved ones at the in-clinic visits and reduce the time in clinic. We're also providing a video overview of the study to help interested families learn more. There's no required overnight and clinic stays, and we've reduced the frequency of assessments to make visits less burdensome. We're working with clinics and specialized vendors to identify a dedicated person who can also assist families with navigating the clinic visits. And we've also have arranged to work with a travel vendor who can help with traveling to the site with those arrangements, and hopefully this will lessen the burden on families. And we are also providing reimbursement for meals and transportation. So REVEAL is a global phase 3 trial for children and adults with Angelman syndrome. Participants will be required to have a deletion or mutation in their UBE3A gene, and will include approximately 200 children and adults ages 2 to 50 in the study. It is a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, and participants will receive doses every 3 months. So our objectives are, the primary objective is to evaluate the effect of Ion 5A2 on expressive communication as measured by the Bayley-4, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. We've also included other objectives that are going to evaluate symptoms that are important, that we've learned from you are important to families and patients. And those include cognition, which is learning and memory, receptive communication, so the ability to understand others, overall disease severity, sleep problems, motor function, so that's the ability to move, and daily living skills. We will also carefully evaluate safety, and this is monitored by a board of independent physicians, as well as your study doctor, and also the Ionis study team and medical team. This trial will start in the first half of 2025. It is a global study, and the first sites that are anticipated to open will be in the US. We will have clinical sites around the world, and those will open later this year. Sites will be posted on clinicaltrials.gov when they are ready to screen potential participants. The trial will last about 3.5 years, and there are two parts of the trial. There's a one-year double-blind placebo-controlled period, and where patients will receive ION582 or placebo. And then there is a 2-year long-term extension where everyone receives ION582. And we do realize this is a big commitment, and it's important that families and individuals feel that they can make the commitment to participate in the trial for its duration. Your collaboration and partnership are so important for the development of ION582. So a little bit more about the Bayley scale of infant and toddler development and what it measures. So the scale is an objective direct measure of cognition, expressive and receptive language, and gross and fine motor skills. The age range is 16 days to 3.5 years of typically developing children. It is administered in the clinic, and it takes about 30 minutes to an hour to administer. It is the most widely used standard measure of early development. And although it was not specifically designed for Angelman syndrome, it has been used in a lot of the Angelman natural history studies. So its performance has been well characterized in individuals with Angelman syndrome, and it has also been included in several clinical trials and is a direct measure of clinical functioning. And so a little bit more about what it does measure. It evaluates expressive communication, which includes pre-verbal, so babbling or gestures, as well as verbal, so that's naming objects or pictures. Receptive communication, that's comprehension of verbal and nonverbal communication, identifying objects or pictures. And then also cognitive, so learning, memory, and concept formation. It also evaluates motor, which includes fine motor, so that's reaching, object manipulation, and grasping, as well as gross motor, so that's locomotion and coordination and balance. So now I'll take you through the design of Reveal. We'll start with screening. So participants will come into the study and they'll be evaluated based on their eligibility criteria. And so, Jeff, I don't know if you can click. Yeah, thank you. So participants will be evaluated for that. And then if they are eligible for the study, the next step is randomization. So participants will be twice as likely to receive ION582 than placebo in the 1-year double-blind treatment period. So during this period, trial participants, caregivers, clinicians, and Ionis will not know which treatment participants are receiving. During this period, they will receive ION582 at 40 milligrams every 3 months or 80 milligrams every 3 months, or they will receive placebo every 3 months. So it's important in scientific studies such as this that we avoid bias so that researchers can understand if the experimental medicine, in this case ION582, or something else is causing the effects that they are observing. And so including a placebo group in a scientific study is the gold standard. And it's important to note that the placebo contains no active ingredients and also is administered in the exact same way as ION582. And as I mentioned earlier, not even the study doctor will know who is randomly assigned to ION582 or placebo. So after the double-blind treatment period, we will have our primary data analysis where we will evaluate the effects of ION582. And when a participant completes the double-blind treatment period, it's important to note they will immediately transition to the 2-year long-term extension. And during this time, trial participants, caregivers, and clinicians will not know which dose of ION582 that they are receiving. And all participants will receive ION582 at 40 milligrams or 80 milligrams every 3 months during this part of the study. So we just wanted to share a bit more about how ION582 or placebo is administered to patients. The study drug is administered intrathecally into the cerebral spinal fluid via a lumbar puncture. So a lumbar puncture, or an LP, is a procedure used to collect cerebral spinal fluid, or CSF, and is performed in the lower back. So before the LP, participants will be sedated to make the procedure more comfortable. And during the LP, a fine needle is inserted into the lower back, into the space between two vertebrae. And then the CSF is collected from the sac that surrounds the spinal cord. We collect a small volume of the CSF, and that fluid is there to protect the brain and the spinal cord from injury. After the CSF is collected, the study drug is then injected into the lower back, where it can travel up to the brain, which is where it needs to be to do its work. Okay, so with that, I'll hand the presentation over to Valerie Coletta, our clinical operations lead for this program.
Thank you very much, Candace. So I'm Val Coletta. I'm the lead clinical operations Ionis team member for the ION 582 program. And I will walk you through what it would look like to participate in the REVEAL phase 3 trial. So as Candace was stating, that the total length of this trial will be about three and a half years, and it will consist of different phases. The screening phase, and then the 1 year long double-blinded phase where participants will be randomly receive either ION 582, one of the 2 doses, or placebo. In this part of the study, there will be 9 in-person clinic visits. 5 of those visits will be slightly longer because they will include the intrathecal administration of ION 582 or placebo. At the end of the 1 year, all patients will move into the long-term extension phase of the trial. The patients who were already randomized to ION 582 will continue to receive that dose level of ION 582. And those who had originally been receiving the placebo will be randomized to one of the 2 ION 582 doses. So during this long-term extension phase, which will last 2 years, the study participants will receive 9 doses of 582, and there will be 14 in-person clinical visits. And during all of these visits, the clinical and home assessments will cover a wide scope of endpoints, but in particular, they will cover the most important endpoints for evaluation of subjects with Angelman syndrome, and that is cognition, communication, overall disease severity, sleep problems, motor function, and daily living skills. Next slide, please, Jeff. So in summary, the Ionis team is enthusiastically progressing the clinical development of ION 582. As you've heard from my colleagues, we are on track to initiate the phase 3 study called REVEAL in the first half of this year. We are continuing to advance the HALO study. So all the subjects are in long-term extension phase of the HALO studies. We do plan to add a 0 to 2-year-old infant cohort, as Rob spoke about earlier in this presentation, and that we are on track to have initiate also this year. And we will continue to listen and learn to understand the needs and priorities of the Angelman community. Excuse me. So on behalf of the Ionis team, I thank you very much for the opportunity we had today to speak to all of you. And thanks for all that you've done and will do to support the Angelman syndrome community and the development of ION 582. In particular, we also wish to thank the Angelman syndrome community and all the HALO's participants, their families, and caregivers. Next slide. In closing, please note this information and all these tools where you can find more information regarding the REVEAL study. We've developed a website. You can see the address here You can also go to clinicaltrials.gov, where our phase 3 trial and the HALOS trial are both in there with more information. And we do have a specific Ionis clinical trial call center, and the slide is showing the telephone number in the email. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to Amanda and Ryan.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all that great information. We've had a number of really good questions come in, which we'd expect from this amazing community. I do want to start with something related to long-term extension. So will participants have access to ION 582 after the 8-month post long-term extension follow-up period, essentially while we're waiting for potential regulatory approval? Could you talk a bit about that access piece?
Yes, sure. I can speak to that. If Ionis files for regulatory approval, then we will plan to update the study protocol to enable people enrolled in REVEAL to continue to access ION 582 through the open label part of the trial, the long-term extension, until it becomes commercially available, or if development is discontinued in their region.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So our next question that came through talks a little bit about the dosing approach. So can one of you speak to the rationale behind the dosing approach and using the 2 different doses, including why it's randomized rather than based on age or body weight?
Yeah, I can take that one, Amanda. So just to recap, right, in REVEAL, we're going to be testing 2 study doses. So participants will be randomized either to placebo or the 40 or 80 milligram dose level. And just to recap, right, those are the same 2 dose levels, the higher dose levels that were used in the HALOS study before. So we're using the information from HALOS to guide, what's being used in REVEAL. So, we've seen really encouraging data at both dose levels in REVEAL, in HALOS, but in REVEAL, we want to really better understand any differences in efficacy and safety based on dose. And the best way to do that is in a larger scale trial that's randomized, placebo controlled, to really give us that robust data. I just wanted to point out too, in the HALOS study, right, we also tried 20 milligrams, and we actually found that was less efficacious than the 2 higher doses. So that's why we didn't move the 20 milligram forward, but we did see similar benefits at 40 and 80 milligrams. And so that's why we decided to take them forward to better understand how they're going to perform in that larger study. So it's a little early. We don't have enough data to really understand which dose is going to be the winner here. And that's what REVEAL is going to help us decide.
Well, thank you. And I think that also answers one of the live questions that came through about how do the doses being tested in REVEAL compare to those in a prior study. So you answered 2 questions in one. So thank you. Ryan?
Great. Yeah, I actually just want to follow up just a bit on that last one on dosing. And I'm assuming the dosing schedule will also be the same. So we're not talking about a different dosing schedule. We've heard parents questioning or asking about that. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that or clarify that?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, it'll be the same dosing schedule that we're using in the long-term extension in HALOS. So that's every 3 months.
Okay. All right, we're gonna switch a bit towards a different set of questions. This one related to what are the most common side effects observed so far, and how are you thinking about this being monitored?
I can take that one too, if that's okay, Ryan.
Yeah.
I talked a little bit about this in my section, but the most common adverse events were fever, vomiting, upper respiratory tract infections. So, kind of common cold. These are things that we've seen in the natural history study reported previously in individuals with Angelman syndrome. So, these are things that we didn't, they're not unexpected, right? In the study. But that said, we're going to continue to learn about safety of ION 582 through HALOS and that long-term extension, as well as in REVEAL. We talk a lot about efficacy, but I highlighted too, safety is also right up there in terms of importance and what we want to evaluate. So when individuals and families enroll in REVEAL, they're going to be trained on how to monitor and report for any changes in the health of their loved ones to the study doctor. And we get those reports. The clinic doctor gets those reports. We have an independent committee of physicians that sees those reports. And so There are a lot of different people looking very closely at that safety data to understand, is this something we'd expect from the disease, or is it something from the drug or the procedure? So all that is kind of used together to help monitor safety there. So as with all of this, it's a very collaborative effort.
Great.
Awesome. So we're going to switch again and talk a little bit about outcome measures, which is something that's a really kind of often topic in our community. So you've already talked a little bit about the outcome measures that are being used, but can you talk a little bit more about what outcome measures are being used and how they were selected?
Sure, I can speak to that. Thanks, Amanda. So our REVEAL study is designed to evaluate both efficacy and safety of ION 582. And our primary endpoint for this trial is expressive communication as measured by the Bayley-4 assessment. And while no outcome measure is perfect, the Bayley is the most widely used standard measure of early development in both natural history and clinical trials of Angelman syndrome. So when we selected this primary endpoint for this study, we sought and listened to feedback from caregivers, patient advocacy leaders, clinicians, researchers, regulators, and scientists who clearly told us that improvement in communication, particularly expressive communication, is most meaningful to families with Angelman syndrome. But we do recognize there are many symptoms which could benefit from a treatment and be meaningful to families and individuals. So we've included several important additional endpoints that look at overall disease severity, receptive communication, cognition, sleep, and motor, and also daily living skills, because we recognize these are also very important.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great. So this one, so is there a future trial being planned? And this is a question that comes up quite frequently, understandably. A future trial being planned for individuals with UPD, ICD? And if so, what is the anticipated timelines here? We've heard you mentioned in past forums about wanting to study these populations, but could you elaborate on what the plans are?
Sure, I can take that one. Thanks, Ryan. So our goal at Ionis is to develop a treatment that's accessible to all those living with Angelman syndrome. And due to the mechanism of how our drug works, how ION 582 works, there's a small theoretical risk of overexpression of ION 582, of UBE3A in patients with UPD or ID. This theoretical risk doesn't exist for patients with a mutation or a deletion in UBE3A. So in line with our commitment to ensure the safety of our drugs and for our trial participants, we're developing a separate plan to evaluate ION 582 in patients with UPD and ID. And as soon as we have more information, we will share that.
Wonderful. I'm sure everyone will be waiting to hear. So thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about dosing days. Some of the families have asked and are just thinking about if they were selected to be a part of the trial on that dosing day. How long must a person in a trial be in the Trendelenburg position after receiving the dosing?
Sure, I can speak to that one too. Thanks, Amanda. So Ionis does not require sites to use the Trendelenburg procedure for any pre-lumbar puncture medications, or any pre-lumbar puncture medications, I should say, beyond those that will be appropriate, such as sedation and local anesthesia, to make the individual more comfortable. And we expect that the LP procedure should last less than 20 minutes.
Wonderful. And if I can ask you, because there may be people listening that have no clue what I just said and what the Trendelenburg position is, can you just give a high-level understanding of what that means?
Sure. Yes, it requires the patient to be inverted, upside down, and so we don't for our trial that's not necessary, which is great, and also any other medications that besides sedation or those just to make the patient more comfortable, we don't require any other medications as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
Right. So a key question we get all the time, of course, and understandably, where will the studies be conducted? Where are the trial sites located, and information about how people can find out about that?
Thank you, Ryan. I can take that one. So this is a global study and it will be conducted in multiple countries and regions. The team is working very diligently on getting all of these country approvals and sites around the world up and going so enrollment can start as soon as possible. And as the new sites become available, they will be listed on the clinicaltrials.gov website.
Yeah, and Val, just to add on there, there's a lot of work that Val's team is doing to get the sites up and running, and there's a lot of activity that it takes to get a site activated, and so we just want to make sure that we're mindful about when we make that information available, and so when the site is active, when it's available, we'll make sure that as soon as possible, those are listed on clinicaltrials.gov. And, Amanda and Ryan will continue to work with you on, if it makes sense to have a community statement or something along those lines to make sure that folks are aware.
Yeah, and I think families struggle with, are there lists? Do clinics have specific lists of patients that are waiting? And I think these are questions you have to have with the individual PI.
That's right.
You all just clarify that there's not something you all are involved in when it
We
comes.
have no list.
That's
right. We have no list. We do not keep a list. Enrollment is for the investigators at the individual sites. That's their responsibility. There's a lot that goes into it and making sure that the inclusion and exclusion criteria are reviewed. And that's again, back to your, the family's individual medical situation, and it's not something that, we can answer. So those, we rely on our partnership with the investigators. And so, having families stay close to their clinician, and then the site PIs, the primary investigators, when those are available, that I think is the best path. We do have, we showed the clinical trial call center email and phone number. So, we do, when sites are available, we will let you know. And if you contact that call center, we will be able to let you know there's a site available in your area or in the general area. And so we do that, but yes, we do not keep a list.
But can you also, thank you for that. Could you also clarify, is this what's considered competitive enrollment, and describe what that means? And so if a site may roll a large number of patients versus another, how does that work in the spread of patients across different clinics?
I can take that, Ryan. Yeah, this will be competitive enrollment globally based. So all the sites will have an equal opportunity to enroll patients.
So you guys kind of already touched on the last question when we talk about lists, but first, just a lot of the questions that have come through the Q&A is specifically, how does a family enroll in the study? So if one of you can just say, best advice we can give you if you're interested in being in the study, this is the first step you should take.
But I can tell you that, yeah, best advice is to find a clinical site via all the methods that we had on that previous slide, what you can reach out to, where you can find it, and reach out to the clinical site. Once they're active, they're open to receiving all questions and yeah, in any enthusiastic or anybody that wants to enroll in the study, yeah, that's the way. We don't get involved. It is those investigative clinical sites that will take on all of the questions from the families who want to be involved.
So for everyone that's listening and panicking that they didn't take down the information on the last slide, no worries. This is going to be recorded. We'll share it, and we'll make sure that you have all of that information in your hands as we move forward. So Ryan, I think you have maybe the last question.
Amanda, just one, yeah, and Ryan, one quick thing, just on Val's point. There are no, just additional information. There are no sites that are active currently. So the site is not, the trial is not yet initiated. We've said, first half of the year, we're still on track for that. So, that's looking good, but there are no sites that are active today. When they are, we'll get them listed on clinicaltrials.gov. That's going to be, the central location where that information occurs. And as we said, there's a lot that goes into it, from, regulatory engagement to, site contracting to ethics committees. There's a lot of activity that needs to happen, and that happens at different rates with different sites in different countries. So this is a global study, and we're working, in parallel with sites around the globe. But it's not that there will be, as soon as the trial initiates, every site will be active. It'll happen at different rates, and we'll just, as soon as those sites are active, we'll get that listed.
Great.
Wonderful.
It's really helpful. And you go through a process when you're choosing those sites. There's what's called site feasibility. So you all go through an entire process prior to all those other pieces to decide on which sites would be most appropriate, correct?
That's correct, Ryan. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. This question that came in after the first year for the placebo group. How will you decide who gets the 40 mg versus 80 mg in the long-term extension study?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I can speak to that. So the patients that were on placebo, they will be randomized to either 40 milligrams or 80 milligrams during the long-term extension. So that's how we won't know. We won't assign them. It will just be a random process, similar to the start of the study when individuals were randomized to either ION 582 or placebo.
Okay. And just to clarify, the doses being tested in Reveal, can you just clarify how they compare to what was in the prior study for those?
Sure. Yes, so 40 and 80 milligrams were tested in the phase 1 HALO study, which is still ongoing, and they were administered every 3 months. So the same frequency that is being administered, that the ION 582 is being administered in the phase 3 study. And as Rob noted, we did also test a lower dose of 20 milligrams in the phase 1 study, and we are not taking that forward since we saw the most encouraging results with the 40 and the 80 milligram doses.
Okay, wonderful. Really helpful.
Candace, there are a few questions in the Q&A about the outcome measures that we're looking at in Reveal. So could you maybe just give kind of reiterate the outcome measures that we'll be looking at?
Sure. So yeah, as you've already heard a lot about from us today, the Bayley-4 is a key outcome measure that we're including in the study. And that looks at several different aspects of development, including language, cognition, and motor, both gross and fine motor. We are also looking at the severity of disease, the overall severity, to better understand that. And then we'll also look at sleep too, since we know that's very important to families and individuals. And we'll also include, we're looking at activities of daily living skills. And I think that covers the majority of what we're looking at. But I know also too, we plan to evaluate EEGs, and Rob could speak more to that.
Yeah, I can just say that we will be evaluating EEG in Reveal. So, but we've also tried. We understand EEGs are no one's favorite assessment to do. So we've tried to limit that to just some key time points in the study. But yeah, so we'll be getting EEG there, and we're hopeful that that'll continue to be an informative biomarker for the study. But we're also really focused on those endpoints that are meaningful for families. Improving delta is great, but you want to be able to see improvement that impacts your day-to-day life. And so that's the endpoints that we're really focusing on are those that we feel like can measure that real life impact.
One more clarifying thing on the outcome measures that have come up is that when we talk about expressive communication, are you guys measuring that? Is it only verbally, or does it measure the increased use of AAC as an indicator of increased expressive communication?
Yeah, so we don't use devices when we evaluate expressive communication using the Bayley, but it doesn't just include like verbal communication. It also includes pre-verbal, so like gestures and sounds and utterances and things like that. So because there's a lot of different ways that an individual can communicate, and we want to make sure we fully evaluate that.
Fantastic. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay.
We've gotten a lot of questions and we're getting close to time. I just want to remind everyone that we will make sure to take all these questions, compile them and bring them back to Ionis for them to share their feedback on. So if you have asked a question and we haven't gotten to it, please know that it's an important question and we will make sure to answer what we can for sure.
Thanks for that, Amanda. There are some questions here on the adverse events that we've seen with ION 582 in HALOS. And Rob, you talked a little bit about this, Rob, a little bit earlier. Maybe you can just reiterate what we've seen thus far.
Yeah, so the most common ones that we've seen have been things that I think you would expect in the Angelman syndrome, disease, also in just pediatric patients. So upper respiratory tract infections, fevers, vomiting, oftentimes associated with one another. We haven't seen that has been definitively related to the study drug. So, we talk with the investigators, get their thoughts on this too. So these seem to be adverse events that are typical of the disease. So that sort of reiterates it's where we've been happy with the safety and tolerability profile of the drug and the data that we've seen. But it's a short study. It's a small study, or it was a short study. It's morphing into a longer study now, and we need that longer term safety data to further understand the safety profile. So that's where HALOS and REVEAL will help us a lot.
If I can just ask something on the adverse events and when they do happen, can you help families understand that when they participate in the trial and those kind of things happen, the process of support they get from their PI to help them through if those events are happening, just to give some families some peace of mind that if an adverse event happens, even if it's throwing up or a fever, what kind of support should they expect from the actual, testing site PI?
Yeah, I mean, the testing site and the PI are our partners and your partners in this process as well, right? So that's going to be the primary area of communication, is going to be relaying that information to the investigator so that they can follow up on it, do any additional tests that are follow up, and relay that information to us. So that's really the area of communication there, is between families see these things, they absolutely need to report them to the site, to their doctor there that's working with the study, and that information again makes its way to us as well. So that way, we're aware of it, your doctor's aware of it, the monitoring committees are aware of it, and we all can keep a close eye on those adverse events. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you.
One question came in about whether independent walking is a requirement for eligibility. Can you all address that specific question?
Sure, I can do that. No, independent walking is not one of the eligibility criteria in the study.
And I think I saw that some questions come up about the inclusion criteria, and I think that there's a link that people can go to learn more about all of the different criteria. So we'll make sure to get that out as well.
Great, thanks.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Another final procedure question about the sedation given. Can you just reiterate on the type of sedation?
Sure. Yes, it's so the type of sedation is really up to the study doctor, who if you are enrolled in the study, that you will be working with, and they'll determine the most appropriate sedation for the individual to make sure that they are comfortable and during the procedure, and it all goes smoothly.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for your time today.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to thank everyone well, first, thank you, Ryan and Amanda, as always. Such great partners, and we're grateful to have you. And thank you for everyone for joining and for your engagement and your questions. See, there's a lot of additional questions, and we'll take these. Many of them are a little bit detailed for us to get into, or we can't answer. As we've said, we're encouraged by where we are. We have a lot of work to do. This phase 3 trial is intended to tell us a lot. And, unfortunately, we're not able to answer every question that we all have. That's part of why we continue to participate, continue to rely on your participation in research and continue to work hard to answer those questions. So again, thank you so much. Thanks to you, Ryan and Amanda, and everyone, and we'll look forward to connecting again very soon.
You're invited back anytime, and we welcome the opportunity. We appreciate you all joining us. We wish you Godspeed. And we will take every question that came in and make sure that we're logging everything and getting everything we can answered for folks working with the Ionis team. So thank you, everyone. Amanda, any closing?
Yeah, just we are going to work really hard on our side to get this video up and available to the community as soon as possible, along with that information that were on those slides that are really important for people when it comes to having questions about enrollment. So our goal is to get that up, in the next day or so. But thank you so much. Thank you for continuing to work in our community, and we look forward to many more of these webinars together. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.